Our final guest is a member of Parliament. His name is Peter Khalil, and his heritage traces back to Egypt. Not one of the pharaohs, but may well have been. You never know. Currently, he's the federal member for Wills. In fact, he was elected the member in 2016. He's the son of migrant parents, grew up in inner city housing commission flats in Melbourne. He has a background in law, has an interest in foreign policy, multiculturalism, and human rights. I should add he's had extensive experience working in both government and private enterprise, most notably for me as the Executive Director of Corporate Affairs, Strategy and Communications at SBS. These days, he's a non-resident adjunct associate professor at the Centre for International Security Studies at Sydney Uni. And Ruveyda, I should mention, and we shouldn't hold it against him, he's a Collingwood football supporter. Oh. I had the pleasure of catching up with Peter Khalil just a few days ago.
Hi, George. Thanks so much for such a kind introduction. How are you?
I'm not too bad at all. I noticed that everything is very much on hold. We're in suspension mode, which means your Collingwood Football Club can't do much of anything other than quite possibly look at one another on Zoom and talk about upcoming tactics and the possibility that they might enter the grand final if it is to be played in 2020.
That's true. And I think all of us are feeling withdrawal symptoms for whatever code, football, AFL, football, soccer, NRL, whatever it might be. It's a big part of our lives that has gone missing amongst many other things, such as spending time with family and friends. So as these restrictions start to ease, I think people are going to be very, very happy and excited to watch sport, to play sport, community sport, to be with family and friends. We are, after all, social animals, social beings. We need that interaction. That's one of the things I think we've missed the most.
You're absolutely 100%, Peter. But can we talk about something that's very close to my heart, and I know it is to yours as well, and it's the subject of multiculturalism. I'm very keen to know what's going to happen to Australia post-COVID-19. What is the country going to look like, especially when you consider that international travel, as we knew it, will take an eternity to return, if ever, to the levels of the past. And I noticed that Christine Keneally was out and about the other day talking about how Labor is looking at trimming the number of migrants seeking to come down under. And of course, I understand the focus will be on Australians finding jobs. So what are we going to look like come post-COVID-19 when it comes to migration?
Well, they're all big questions. And look, I think, to be clear, the op-ed that you referred to talked about a reduction in temporary migration, not necessarily migration. You and I know very well, as passionate advocates of multiculturalism and a multicultural Australia, that the post-World War II model of immigration, where people came here, like your parents, my parents came from Egypt, to settle in this country long term, to become new Australians, that was the central, critical element in our success as a nation, both our cultural and social capital that we've built over generations, and I think critical to our economic prosperity, frankly. That permanent skilled migration, permanent migration, where people came here and made a commitment to this country. Now, I'm an advocate, obviously, we're biased because I was a former Multicultural Commissioner, worked at SBS, a migrant myself. I'm an advocate for an increase in permanent migration. And that might mean a reduction in temporary migration. And frankly, if there are many people on temporary visa holders who are aspiring to become Australians, then we should be giving them those places. Because frankly, temporary migration is really just there to fill skill shortages, and it's being used, I think, in another way. It's a door into permanent residency, and not just of filling a skill shortages. So if we want to really be serious about increasing our migration, our permanent migration, we should increase the numbers and not allow people to be exploited under the temporary visa holder areas where there is a fair bit of exploitation. And then when people are forced to go home, guess what, George? They take their learnings with them. They take their experience with them and go back home. We want them to Australia. And the last point I'll make, when you say what is Australia going to look like, we must have migration to this country because it's going to be critical for our economic recovery. Everyone knows that. And we cannot allow ourselves to fall into this trap of having this frankly racist debate about shutting the doors. It's never worked. Every time we've brought people here, the country has improved culturally, socially, economically. So I'm a very strong advocate of that. And that's something that we're going to be debating as a nation over the coming months. And it's an important debate. And 5 points, sorry, you say, what will we look like? Well, guess what? We already are a multicultural nation. And when I talk about Australian jobs for Australians, which I do, I talk about jobs for Greek Australians and Turkish Australians and Lebanese Australians and Chinese and Vietnamese and Indian and Irish Australians, because that's who we are already. You know, the debate is kind of moot because we are already a diverse, a cultureless nation, and a successful one at that. And I want to keep it that way, and I want to keep building it in that way.
Peter Khalil, I can hear the passion, I can hear the love and the understanding of a very complicated subject that you and I appreciate very much. I'm a former member of the Immigration Review Panel that was set up by Ian McPhee, so I have an inner understanding of the challenges from the government side, also from the public service point of view, and also as the member of the jury or the honest brokers that panel was trying to be at the time. So I understand there are many competing interests, but you touched on something that I need to address too, and you touched on racism. We have seen some unfortunate incidents of racist behaviour. Some people have displayed it in a most ugly way during this pandemic. How do we go about combating it? And have we forgotten the key messaging that's important from federal government level, from state government level, and from local government level?
Well, absolutely. And we've been arguing at federal Labor for an anti-racism campaign, which is very necessary. Every generation, you start this educational element anew. You know, you don't just spring up mushrooms knowing full well the important lessons that we've learned in previous generations. I think it's a iterative process. And so I think the people that have been attacking Chinese Australians and Asian Australians, blaming them for the coronavirus, I mean, it is stupid, misplaced hatred and anger and racism. These people have nothing to do with coronavirus. I mean, that's ridiculous. But obviously there's an anger that is being, a blind anger that is being expressed and is very much misplaced. And people are right to be angry about the coronavirus. It has turned the world upside down. Don't get me wrong. If anything, they should be channeling their anger at those who are responsible or where the accountability should be. I've argued publicly that the international community should be working together to get to the bottom of how this started, and countries that are involved taking accountability and responsibility. If it's China, if it's other countries, these questions need to be answered. That's where we should be focusing our attention. But that blind hatred and that blind anger, we need to address that. And that is really a disturbing element of the pandemic.
Peter, what do you make of the agents of evil? That's what I call them. They're the shock jocks, the people who have fomented these divisions, not only now, but in the past. I think during the Cronulla riots a number of years ago, I sat there and listened to two key broadcasters. One is about to retire. The other one maybe should have retired a while ago, Ray Hadley and Alan Jones. Let's not hide their names. They have been key and strident fomenters of trouble, and not only dissent and racism, but I'm ashamed to say that they're still being employed, they're still being propped up as key figures that should expound some measure of vision, of understanding for the whole community to take on board. I'm absolutely stunned. I cannot believe that they, to this day, are given such a platform to work on.
Huge responsibility. You talk about the right-wing shock jocks. Huge responsibility and accountability for fomenting divisiveness, division, and particularly against Muslim Australians as well. And in this time of Ramadan, the holy month of Ramadan, and Ramadan Kareem, or Kullu Sana wa Tayyibin, to all of those listening. I say it in Arabic, I don't know the Turkish, but I say in Arabic, a blessed Eid for everyone. A time of reflection, a time of spirituality, a time of giving to others and sacrifice, and an understanding that we need to treat our fellow human beings, regardless of their background, ethnicity or gender or faith, with compassion and love. That is a key message in Ramadan. And unfortunately, George, you noted that there are many people in our society who do the exact opposite of that, who seek to foment division, either for ratings or for ideological reasons, for short-term political gain. And that has been a very sad chapter in the last couple of decades in our public debate, where these characters have been allowed to actually go ahead and do this in such a stark way. You noted the Cronulla riots and how shocking they were and how they actually exacerbated that and pushed it. Now we're fighting against that kind of ideological and divisiveness that you see from those parts of that political spectrum. And it's an ongoing battle, and it will continue. It has been ever thus, George. Those of us who want to appeal to hope in politics have a much harder job, because it's easy to appeal to fear. It's easy to set up a boogeyman, whether they're a Chinese Australian or a Muslim Australian, because that whips up fear, and you can whip that anger up very, very easily, and the mob can get whipped up very easily. We constantly have to resist that and fight that. It's a harder job that we have, but I think it's all of our responsibility, whether we're in politics or whether you're in broadcasting, play that very critical role, because frankly, we've been successful as a multicultural nation. We've been cohesive because we have been practicing more of what we've been talking about, what you've been talking about, that what we have with each other as human beings, what we share, is much more important than what divides us. What unites us is more important. That's our humanness. And that's something we're going to keep fighting for.
Peter, before I let you go, give us a sense of the seat of wills. What sort of work does your office do or plan to do with the many local multicultural communities that lie within it? What have you been doing during this pandemic to help them, especially with those who are struggling with English and don't necessarily have the same entry to all the information that's about for the rest of us?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, because we've actually become much more busier with our constituent work, helping the local community and particularly vulnerable people, and this pandemic has meant so many people are calling our office for assistance, information, helping guide them through the issues. We've done everything, George. We've helped 8-year-olds get their groceries. We've provided in-language services, communications in language with information in Arabic, Italian, Greek, Turkish, and other languages like Hindi and Punjabi and others, because a lot of people, particularly new and emerging migrants and older migrants who still, revert to language, particularly in their retirement, find it difficult to understand what's going on. So I'll put some ads out on SBS. You wouldn't be surprised. Some radio ads out on SBS in language, in Italian and Greek and Arabic and so on, to inform people about it. And they're coming to our office. We're helping them access Centrelink, helping them with JobKeeper, helping small businesses, helping pensioners, helping students, helping people who are disabled and trying to access NDIS issues. My team and I have been working flat out on that. And that's part of our service to the public. This is a part of the job that I really love, which is helping others. But we have I have a national responsibility as well on policy. That's why I'm working on multicultural policy within the Labor Party. Anthony Albanese put me as chair of the Labor's multicultural course, and we're doing consultations now on Zoom with multicultural communities across the country, in every capital city and regionally, to help to listen to people and understand their issues and what it means to be Australian. What is our identity? You asked about this at the top of this interview. What are we going to look like as a nation? I'm trying to get to the bottom of this, get a sense of where people see us and how they see our future and the evolution of multiculturalism as a concept. And of course, the policies that help people access, equity, education, healthcare, all of these issues for those communities, those new and emerging migrant communities, and our parents and grandparents who are aging as well, and how we help them in this period of their lives. So there's a lot of work to do locally, helping people. And I say too, we do a lot of work with refugees and asylum seekers who are the most vulnerable in the community, given they've been left out of any payments and support. And we do that work at the local level, and at the national level as well. That's part of my job, and I love doing it because it's about serving others. It's about giving to others and sacrificing for others. And I think, if I can say this, George, in Ramadan, that people are reflecting on how their own spirituality progresses and how they treat others. In this pandemic, we've got all the money towards the economic stimulus that we've passed as a parliament. We've got all of the social distancing edicts and rules. But alongside that, I think what is the key to get us through this is how we treat our fellow human beings, how we work for each other and work with each other. That, somewhat immeasurable, but I think is the most important element. How as a society we will get through this together, as everyone says. We have to work for each other and with each other to get through this. That's something that we're in the middle of. I know you are as well, and many others and during Ramadan, charity is a big part of things, and there's a lot of volunteered their time and effort, not just my staff, but volunteers to help. So thank you for that.
Powerful messages from Peter Khalil. Peter, thank you very much for taking the time and joining us, especially during this important time and through the holy month of Ramadan. Ramadan Mubarak. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Ramadan Mubarak, everyone.